Good morning, everybody. Tuesday morning here. We've got some of our favorite contestants, we might call them, and Dr. Dean is in the house, so I feel extra safe, extra safe. We're going to talk today a little bit about planning for the future, whatever that future is going to look like. We don't know. We hope you're all safe and well and taken care of. Let's hand it over to Trenton to announce and talk about our illustrious group. Trenton.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. I'm really excited about this topic. I'm excited to have this group, and we're going to talk a lot more about what this group is doing in terms of some of the work we've been doing internally to plan for or be thinking about how we help folks as they start thinking about the future. And before we jump in and do introductions, I also, it's been interesting is I was thinking about this topic and the challenges that we have all faced as a result of, COVID and having to go to a completely change everything we're doing, and moving to a model where we're not face to face with students, we're learning remotely and doing the very best we can. And as we think about how we prepare moving forward, we're kind of preparing with multiple contingencies. We may be coming back to school face to face in the fall, which I hope is the case. Like I really, for all of our sakes, I hope that we have the opportunity to have our students back in our classrooms. And that's going to present some real challenges for us to start up again. And on top of that, I can't help but think about the last week and the impact that that's had on all of us. We're not just talking about academics at this point. We're also talking about uncertainty and fear and anxiety and having to address things that we talked about, say, last week when we talked about equity, the lack of equity in our schools. And I watched my daughter as she said, I don't want to see the news. I don't want to see the news. It stresses me out. It makes me worried. It makes me fearful. And so this is a really unprecedented time. We have students who are dealing with the challenges of having to learn from home. We've had the fear and anxiety associated with the pandemic. And then recently we've had some very upsetting and challenging social issues just playing out before us in our cities and our towns. Here in Salt Lake City, we had, protests that I never would have expected, with police cars turned over and those kinds of things that make all of this, I think, much more real in terms of the role that we play as educators, that our role coming back, whatever that looks like, is going to be essential in creating safe spaces for our students, whether that's in our classrooms, where I hope we are, or whether that's having to do a model where students are learning remotely. And so this group, I think we have assembled 4 of the finest educators on the planet. They have, over the last several months, I guess it's a couple months as this all broke out, we brought these guys together and started talking about what's it going to look like. We should start thinking about this. We should start talking to lots of people. We should start this live stream. And we should be developing some plans to help administrators move forward, which is going to be our Virtual Leadership Institute, which the 4 of you have developed and are going to help lead. And we'll talk about that today. But let's start with introductions. And I don't know if it's the same on your screen, but we'll go with Shara and Dean, and then Nancy and Todd last. Very last, Todd.
Save the best for last. Greetings. I come to you from Nebraska. I am called the Canvas Enthusiast here. I am a blended coach and a Canvas LMS administrator for 14 school districts. I work at the consortium level here in Nebraska. Glad to be with you.
Dean. Did we lose Dean?
Hey, my name is Dean Wilson. I'm the Vice President of Student Services for Uintah Basin Technical College. We are a rural technical college that services about 4,000 students. A lot of our students are secondary students. So in a given year, we may have 2,000 to 2,500 secondary students that attend our school as well. So the balance between K-12 and higher ed is a delicate one at best. And right now we are gearing up to meet the needs of not only our higher education responsibilities, but also our K-12 partners as well.
Nancy.
Greetings, everyone. Nancy Brightwell. I'm an executive director in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools in Charlotte, North Carolina, large urban district, and I oversee support for about 29 of our highest need turnaround schools in Charlotte, and have been having fun learning alongside all of us together in this new unprecedented time. So glad to be with you all.
Thank you, Nancy. Todd.
Hi, I'm Todd Theobald. I'm based out of Salt Lake City. I have been an elementary school teacher and principal most recently. I'm currently half-time, splitting my time between being a school level administrator and then also consulting all over with an emphasis in turnaround using data-driven practices to get better results and outcomes for kids.
Awesome. So let's talk about going back to school and being prepared for the future. You know, and I think it's better to say let's be prepared for the future than let's talk about going back to school, because we honestly don't know, but we need to be prepared. You all have been working on developing the Virtual Leadership Institute, which is going to be 4 short sessions. They're going to be virtual sessions. People are going to have an opportunity to learn from each of you, and we've all had an opportunity to learn from one another. But each of those sessions is really going to focus on different key areas that we should be thinking about, leading us up to a place of developing our plan for going back to school in the fall. And as you guys are thinking about going back to school, and even in the context of the way that I set this up, that I think we thought about it from the standpoint of the impact that the COVID issues have had, but also just with the recent changes and the fear and anxiety, how important it is that we start really thinking about developing plans that are not just, you know, like the operational things of we've got to do X, Y, and Z, but how do we get back to a place come fall where we are prepared and prepared to address all of those extenuating circumstances that are going to confront us moving forward. We're going to start, Todd, with some of your thoughts as you think about those things. What are the high-level things that people should be thinking about?
I think one of the first things I think about just as an administrator in the building is setting that tone for comfort and safety. And that is something that I think, you know, you talked about your daughter and stuff, that there's so many kids and teachers coming back wondering, what's it all going to look like? And the answer right now is we have no idea. But the things that principals really need to work on is how do we establish that culture of like safety and comfort that help them understand that we've got their back, that we're aware of all the challenges that come with kids missing, you know, elements of school over the past couple of months, no matter how hard we've tried to have good instruction from a distance. But helping being an advocate for teachers and create that open, honest place where teachers can address their fears and concerns so that we are aware of them and that we can work through them.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Nancy, as you think about it in your setting, you're working with a lot of schools, a lot of really challenged communities. What are some of the things that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I would echo what Todd said, just about thinking about people's sense of well-being. And I recently saw a social media quote that kind of stuck with me that says, you have to Maslow before you can bloom. And I think, you know, that's just really, really critical. We've got to be connecting with families. We've got to be connecting with our staff members and doing what we can to assess where they are and what they see their needs are during what could be a very flexible and sort of ever-changing landscape for us going into next year. We're also thinking just about, you know, we're going to need to prioritize the most essential skills and understandings that if we have abbreviated days in some kind of mixed or hybrid or back to virtual environment, you know, taking the time this summer to really work with vertical teams to prioritize, like, what are the critical skills and understandings that kids need that perhaps they have some unfinished learning around that we need to plan for in terms of pacing. And then I also think just leaders need to have some think time and some thought partners and support around how do we keep the structures that we typically know in a school, like collaborative PLCs or student services teams that work together to wrap around students' basic needs? How do we create scenarios where all of those can be portable support structures and systems?
Yeah, I love the way that you articulated that. And Dean, as I think about your situation, you're dealing with adult learners, college age learners, and there are a lot of folks who are thinking about this from the standpoint of, how do we make sure that our college experiences are going to be really good? I have 2 college age kids. I mentioned my daughter earlier, but my son has 1 semester of school, and he was saying, if I have to go to school online, I'm going to wait a semester. I will literally wait until I can be face to face again. I want to be on campus for, my last semester for my undergrad. What are your thoughts as you think about that, and how do we address that in those, those college and adult learners?
For me, it's capturing the excitement. I mean, if students are saying, I crave that experience, I want that experience, let's capture that excitement as a way to empower our staff to show that, hey, people haven't lost faith in education. People haven't lost faith in the process. People are looking to education to make their lives better. Let's capture that really positive moment, and then let's compare our actions thus far in the new era to, is it effective and is it not? We've just taken the world's largest pre-assessment of how well we're doing in terms of mobilizing from typical brick and mortar to a blended learning or total remote learning situation. Let's be honest with ourselves and our teams about what are the bright spots, what are those keepers, what are those polishers, what are those things that we can do better, and let's frame it around what's best for students, and is this experience, whether it's face-to-face, blended, or completely remote, is this a quality educational experience that I would sign my own student up for? If yes, let's move forward. If not, let's reevaluate. But I think we're at a tipping point. We have the pen in our hands as educators. We better offer our own story, or else others are going to write it for us. So I think this is an empowering moment for all of us.
Yeah, I love that, Dean. I think it's really well said. And Shara, as you look at this from the standpoint of someone who's working directly with both your own students as a teacher, but also you're acting as a coach and supporting other teachers, how are they feeling? What are you saying to them as you're thinking about starting to prepare going back? Because I think there are probably a lot of teachers who are, on the one hand, putting forth their best foot, giving their best effort, and at the same time, maybe you're feeling a little nervous about going back to school in the fall.
It's really interesting because here in Nebraska, school's kind of winding down, and I've been doing a lot of PD with teachers. And I was saying to my husband the other night, I said, the teachers are so receptive. Like, they're so receptive. And this spring was like a time where they were able to see what they needed, and now they're really receptive to new ideas. And I feel like they've learned that they need to work differently, possibly in the fall. So how can I do that? The questions have been so thoughtful, and people are really trying to figure out what's best for kids, not only just from a teacher level, but from like a systematic level, which I'm loving because the conversations are super, super rich. I was in a room yesterday of elementary teachers, and we were just talking about how can we provide a better experience for kids, but also, if we have to be in this situation again, how can we make this easier for parents? And so those conversations that we're having are awesome. Like, I've been waiting to have these conversations, and it's been really awesome to have everybody in the same on the same page. And good teaching is good teaching. It's just, how do we move good teaching into this remote space, or maybe into a space where it's going to be remote and then not remote? And at the key of all of that, and I would say even with my own students this year, it all comes down to relationships. And, Nancy said we have to make sure that we're meeting their social emotional needs and their mental health needs. But at the end of the day, we need to build relationships with kids. And so it's just, I agree with Dean. This is an awesome time because there's a lot of really great conversations that are taking place, and people are eager to do things better and differently. And I think we're in a good spot to make some really cool changes.
Yeah, and I like what you said, Dean. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I see that Erica has a comment here that says, our students are having a difficult time as adults to adapt to online learning. And I think that's super fair. And we need to acknowledge that not only with our learners, but also our adults. We've gone in with a misconception, I think, in a lot of ways that, this is going to be a first order change or something that's very easy to do. When in fact, this is a second order change that's going to require training. It's going to require observation. It's going to require feedback. This is a new way of learning and teaching. And let's not forget that our learners are going to have to adapt as well. So I think what we can do as educational leaders is really within those safe spaces, make allowances for those students that didn't sign up for this type of learning, for those teachers that didn't sign up for this way of teaching, and really self going through on a really individual basis, and not prescribing, but really thinking of our teachers and our learners as, well, what other levels of support do they need to be successful? Let's take stock of what they need in order to move forward. In our adult students, what we found is, a lot of what they need is hand holding on a few things to get them into a system, to get them comfortable. And after that, it takes care of itself. I mean, when we made the move to everything onto Canvas, there was some hesitation amongst our adult learners. And now if you were to try to take that back, I think you'd be fought equally as hard as the move towards it. So it's taking back some of those fears and ensuring a quality experience right out of the gate. Find those pockets of excellence, find those movers and shakers, highlight, exemplify, and then scaffold those that need additional time and support. Our students, like we say, they didn't sign up for this, but we can have a victim or victor mentality, to borrow a line from my friend, is we have to adapt right now. And it's hard to grow, and there's no growth in the comfort zone, no comfort in the growth zone.
A Deanism right out of the gate.
I heard it from someone else, I just don't know who. So a lot of in my life.
So I think this gets us headed in the right direction in this conversation, because as we look at what has kind of occurred, we have to acknowledge that, I think, Dean, your point of it being a second order change is really important, that nobody's really good at something, first time through. It's almost like everybody went back to school as a first year teacher, and nobody really wants to do that. I don't look back and think, if I could just go back and, be a first year teacher all over again, that doesn't appeal to me in any way, shape, or form, because I felt the struggle. I went home literally exhausted and overwhelmed and questioned my own success. And in a lot of ways, this has challenged everybody to rethink how to do this work. And we've learned things that work, and we've seen things that don't work. And that, I think, when we talk about the Leadership Institute, I want to highlight something really important that has kind of driven us for a long time. And we developed, Dean and Todd and I developed a Leadership Institute that was really centered around the use of formative assessment and the use of data as opposed to just collecting data. And then we worked on developing a Leadership Institute for the Canvas community as well. And the way those were designed, they were designed for people to come here and bring a cohort of people together and spend a few days together. And they're just the most amazing environment where you can bring 30 leaders from around the country to really discuss a topic like the use of Canvas or the use of data and formative assessment. The growth that we see people make, not because of what we tell them, but because we are a group of people kind of bringing things together around a common mission, I think is really powerful. But the other thing that we know is really important about that, and we learned this a few years ago, is that if we can engage leaders, whoever those leaders are, they can be teacher leaders, school building leaders, superintendents, university presidents, bring people together to get people to think about these things. They take that back with them, and it makes them, it creates opportunities for them to provide better leadership for their teachers around these things. And so as we looked at what was going on, we said, this is really going to be a leadership issue going back. Teachers, professors, everyone is going to be looking for someone to come in and say, here, this is where we're going. Somebody's got to have a vision. Somebody's got to make this work. So that's really where the virtual leadership sessions, the idea for that came about was, we need to bring people together small groups, cohorts of say 25 or 30 people, and really discuss these topics. And one of the first topics that's on the agenda is really just getting down to what we've learned. What have we learned during this time? And I'm going to start with you, Shara. What have we learned as we've gone through the last couple of months and made a transition to this remote learning?
Well, I had a superintendent tell me the other day, he said, we have to do it better for the fall. So we've been able to self-reflect, and we've learned where maybe our gaps are, where we have some issues. And I think a lot of that is feedback from both kids and parents and our districts, but we have to do it better for the fall. And so we're identifying those areas where we need to improve. Maybe it's a tool that we need to, use a different tool, or maybe it's a different process, but it's given us the ability to kind of diagnose what's going on. And now the conversations are happening this summer about how do we now, fix, or what processes do we put in place, or what tools are we going to use instead? And how do we make this better for kids and parents and stakeholders? So there's a lot of different things. We talked about not only the social emotional and the mental issues that we're having, or the mental health issues that we're doing here. We have some grants that are supporting some of those projects here locally, but also good instruction. And how do we move good instruction from classrooms to maybe a blended environment, or to maybe a remote learning environment? Because really, like I said before, good instruction is good instruction. It's just how do we move that to a different space? Because if you're doing good instruction in the classroom, you totally can move that to a remote space. Just how do we do it? And what's the tool that we're going to use to do that? And that's kind of where I come into play with Canvas, is how do we do this as a system, like a district, versus every teacher doing their own thing? But how can we do this better as a whole so that we are providing a better experience for everyone? So it's been a time of diagnosis and a time of treatment, I guess. We're trying to figure out how to make those things better. And like I said before, great conversations are taking place in all the districts that I'm working with currently.
Yeah. Nancy, what have you guys learned as you look at it? What are your big, what have we learned?
Well, again, my perspective is a very large district that stems from dense inner city to more suburban and rural. And, to be honest, we had a lot of issues with trying to get kids connected. Either they'd have a device and no internet connectivity, or, we couldn't get to them. And so I think one big takeaway for us is that we had to plan instruction for the lowest level of access, and not let any child's level of access be a barrier to them getting instruction. And so that means that we have to differentiate, for the kid that can't get online, that doesn't have access, can we get a book in their hand, and can we have, a phone call at night when somebody is there to try and make those personal connections with kids? So, I think just understanding that we want to reach for the sky, we want to have the highest level of instruction that we can possibly plan for, but we also have to do everything we can to make sure every kid is in some way connected to instruction in some quality way. Another big takeaway, I think, for us was just around communication, and how important it is during times like this to over communicate, in terms of frequency, multiple platforms that we're getting information to our families, to our kids, and then also to understand, in this environment with working parents who are juggling, trying to teach their children and help them to be effective learning coaches, and trying to hold down a household and job if they're available. That communication has to be streamlined. It can't be paragraphs. In many cases, it has to be, bullets, essential information. So I think that has been another big takeaway. And then Shara, you talked about how do we take what we've learned to create quality, engaging instruction if we end up in, a virtual or remote learning platform. And I think another takeaway that we're really marinating on is, what are the best tools that are easy for everybody to access to help for engaging in collaborative conversations with kids. In the regular classroom, we know that that's really, really important for learning to become owned by kids. So how do we make things like that happen? If it's direct instruction, what are the best tools and platforms for that? So just really thinking intentionally about, we have a lot of great tools and trying to match technology tools for different types of instruction that we want to be able to offer so that we've got quality instruction. And then the last thing I would say is for leaders, we've learned the importance of continuing to give observation and feedback. And so sometimes that meant dropping into a teacher's live instruction and looking at what's going well and what's not going well, and just being able to be sort of that fly on the wall to say, did you notice you kind of were losing 2 or 5 of your kids when this happened? Let's talk about maybe a more effective way to accomplish what it was you wanted. So that observation and feedback is just going to be so critically important no matter what environment we are. It continues to be an important lever for capacity building for teachers.
And I love that you explained it that way, because I also think that brings up the real issues of leadership. Like, if you're going to jump in my class in an environment where I'm already scared to death, I better trust you. I better believe you're here to help me, and not in my time of crisis and feeling so overwhelmed by new things, that you're there to evaluate me in some way, that we're all in this together, I think, as Dean talked about. Dean, as you think about that from kind of the higher ed perspective and adult learnings, what are some of those big things? And I do want to say, before you answer that, last week we talked about equity, and we talked about the challenges of devices and internet. And one of my big fears is, that is absolutely, we can't do this if we don't have devices and good internet with students. What my fear has been is that that's where people will stop. They will say, we got our devices, we got our internet, problem solved. Now teachers go figure this out on your own, when that's an infrastructure problem. That's not an instructional problem. And the real challenge, real equity, comes when students have access to their curriculum, to their teachers, to feedback, to support, to their peers. That's equity. And when all students are getting that. So Dean, we talked before this, you guys have seen all kinds of challenges. You've learned all kinds of things in your environment.
So one of the biggest things that I've learned is, blessed are the flexible, because they're never going to get bent out of shape. And in terms of flexibility, as we lead, we try to lead with the cross. We try to show people the best practice, if you will, but we always have a sword, and it's not a crusade. But in terms of a sword, a weak sword is really rigid. A good sword is going to have some flex and some give. And what we've noticed as we've moved forward is, if we pull out the old sword the old way, it's likely to crack. What do we do really well face to face? And let's continue to do that when we can. What can we put online right now and forever moving forward that just makes sense, that is a better experience for our students? If we have to go totally remote, what can we do to move in a direction to where now we're evaluating the effectiveness of the online education, not just check the box, we've got some devices out there. At the end of any major initiative comes an audit. And there will be an audit, so to speak, on this and how well we planned. And what we've learned through our own internal audit is there are some things that we've done in the past that we will never do again moving forward. There are some things that are best housed online that are best for teachers and best for students. So let's celebrate those bright spots. The other thing that I've learned, especially in leadership right now, is everybody's comfort level is going to be different, and it's totally okay to not be okay. It's okay to be fearful. It's okay to not be ready to go. But what we can't do is we can't lean back and wait and see what happens. We've got to push against the chaos and really lean in to show that confidence and competence, not only for our staff, but for our students as they come back. Yesterday was a really awesome day. I'm going to get emotional. We had students lined up waiting at the door, 6 feet apart, trying to come in. And it was like Christmas morning, seeing the campus return with students that want to learn. Capture that moment. We've got big signs that say, what's my why? Why did I choose to lean in and come back amongst all of this? And what our students are telling us, especially our adult students, is, I want to be that example for that next generation, because I'm a first generation college student. I'm not going to be the last. And those are some of the most powerful narratives that we can capture as examples of what it really means to adapt, evolve, and make meaning out of our new situation. So for me, it's really being a curator of greatness and then highlighting that every opportunity I get.
Yeah, I like the way that you talked about that. And I think that also lends itself to the importance of what we're talking about in the virtual leadership institutes, the opportunity to bring people together. Because ultimately, I think a lot of the learning that I've seen going on is people talking to each other, administrators calling administrators, superintendents calling superintendents, people finding out what other people are doing, and things that work are getting passed on, and things that aren't, people are saying, oh, we made the same mistake. We tried that. It didn't really work. Todd, as you think about that, what are some of the things that you in your situation, as you're looking at your own school and your experiences and talking to your peers, what are some of the things that you've learned?
So I think like what you just said is key, is as we establish these learning institutes, whether they were virtual or, in person, like the core of all of that is best practice. It's bringing people together to really explore best practice and to save them some pain and discomfort by saying, hey, we tried that, here's how we did it, or beware of this and that. And I think that's the thing that I'm learning most in being and talking to so many different leaders all across the country, and also to teachers, whether it's at an elementary level, secondary level, or even university professors. I think we talked about second order change. This is really, the tables have turned with all this. Some of your best teachers in a traditional setting are flailing, and some of your brand new teachers who just came out of university where they had online courses and that experience, they're thriving and helping. So I think it's really having a plan as we move forward to take the best of everything we have in our buildings, or whether it's coming together in these virtual leadership institutes and finding out what's working best all across the country, not just in our district or our schools that we know, but what do we see great leaders doing all across the country, and maximizing those things and saying, these are the best practices, regardless of what the future holds for us. Here's what we know. Here's how we have great instruction provided the best way that we can, and help us kind of avoid some of those pitfalls that other people have experienced, and coming together and putting that into an actual action plan. I think that's our goal as an outcome for this institute, is that people walk away having considered all of the pieces and creating a plan that works best for their unique challenges in their district or schools, so that they're ready for whatever the future holds as we come back in the fall.
I think that's really key. The role that you all will play is that you are going to help facilitate very clear, kind of structured over the course of 4 different sessions, just to take people through a process to that end result. I wanted to see, Mark, if we could get you to pull up Sally's question, and I wanted Shara to take a swing at that to give a sense of, because I think it's a really important question. One of the things that we really try to focus on is the philosophy and the processes to get there, not necessarily, a button pushing, this is how you do X, Y, and Z. It's more about how you think about that. How would you respond to Sally's question, Shara?
Yeah, so what we're planning to do is, like Todd just said, we're planning on sharing best practices. So, what can you do as a classroom teacher, but then also what can we do across a district to kind of have this united front using the same platform? And like I mentioned before, that's kind of what we were doing this week, working with those I was working with elementary and junior high and high school, and hey, we want this to look, similar. How can we use best practice for parents and students to get into Canvas and find their resources that they need? But there's a lot of best practice that goes on behind the scenes that, parents and kids don't know about, but that teachers need to be aware of. So we're planning on sharing that. Sharing what that best practice looks like, maybe creating some rubrics and plans for those administrators moving forward so that they know what to look for. And that's been one of the exciting parts too, is that I've never had so many administrators in my PD as I have in the last week and a half, which has been great because they want to know, how can we make this better? So looking at this question, are there paths developed for admins already? We're going to talk about some of those, but we're also going to rely somewhat on the people in the room and what are you doing in your buildings that might be working, and how can we leverage what people are already doing and use Canvas, if you're using Canvas in your district, to do that.
We want to build cohorts of people who become connected and friends long after their participation in the Leadership Institutes, whichever version people take in there. I think that's really important. I also think it's important to know that all of it's being developed in Canvas courses so that as you're participating, you will be in there working and utilizing. And we feel like that's actually really important. If you're a leader, there's nothing better than having the experience of what it feels like to be a student, but also as a teacher. And we won't just be talking about Canvas. We'll be talking about really utilizing assessment and formative assessment and data and driving those processes, because as we come back, one of the most important things we're going to need to know is, where are our students? Where are they? How do we begin to tackle those challenges of figuring out where they are and how we best meet their needs? I want to end with kind of one last round. Todd hit on it's going to culminate in the development of a plan, supporting you through that process of developing a plan. But I've really long believed that the real power of Canvas, of a learning management system, it's not so much in the technicals, here's where I put stuff, but it really is about providing a way for teachers to make learning personal for each of their students. And that's in elementary school, that's in middle school, that's high school, that's college. If you don't see Canvas as the vehicle that allows you to personalize or make learning personal for each of your students, that's the framework that we really want people to be kind of approaching this with. And Todd, as you think about that, how important it is, and I think the events of these last few months have really made us appreciate that making learning personal in a classroom, that face-to-face experience, that opportunity for students to see you, there's something about that that's really hard to capture. It's something I think we all miss, are those personal interactions with our students. But if we structure things in the right way, we can create all kinds of opportunities for us to make learning more personal in a remote setting, in a blended setting, in a face-to-face setting. Talk about that, Todd, as you think about what you hope to drive in these conversations with administrators, specifically around making learning personal for students.
So I think that's such a huge theme right now with everything that's going on in our world. It's that kids and adults and everyone have a deep need to be seen and to be heard, not as a demographic or not as a group of kids, but individually. Just they want to know, does my teacher see me? And I think that's what's so powerful about some of even these virtual exchanges with kids. I mean, we've had kids get on and for the first time or figured out how to get into their Zoom class and just like light up to see their teacher, and their teacher acknowledges them and gives them a chance to speak. And it is like you talked about it. We always talk about personalized learning. Personalized learning is a buzzword all over the place, how to target specific students. But everything changes when you say it the way you said it. It's making learning personal. And everyone has a deep need to be seen and be heard. And kids and parents want to know, but what about me? What about me? This may work for all these other kids. We are seeing that more than ever right now as families are trying to support their kids and work at home and try to deal with all the unique challenges that happens. And as administrators, we're getting calls from parents, this isn't working for my family. What about us? This isn't. Everyone wants to know that my situation is seen and that they know what I'm going through, and they're able to personalize it for me so that we can still learn in light of all of our own unique challenges. And that doesn't change as we return back to school. The kids come however they come, with whatever unique experiences or chaos they're dealing with in their own homes, and they just want to be seen. And our goal is to move kids from wherever they're at today and just incrementally increase those skills so that we learn over time and watch that growth and track that growth. And that, to me, is what education is all about.
Yeah, I love that. Nancy, how about you?
Well, I think on a very personal level, I think one of the silver linings in all of this is, typically when kids come to schools, they leave their house behind and they bring their individual body and hope that somebody, sees everything that they just left behind that makes them who they are, that shows up at the, schoolhouse every day. And one of the cool things is, in the live setting, the teacher can see, oh, you've got a little brother and sister. Oh, I didn't know you had a cat. I have a cat. Here's my cat, and just little things like that really help kids. Again, it's magically become easier for us to see and understand a kid's a whole person, and so how can we not lose how important that is? So I think that that's just like a really important part of what has made this so many rich and great stories come out of this unexpected remote learning situation. And then I also think a big thing from teacher standpoint and parent standpoint is that the strength of an LMS is that everything is in one place. If you've got kids at different levels, if schools can agree, in our district, everybody is on Canvas, and that has been super helpful. They don't have to, log into different platforms and figure out how to ask a question on different platforms. Kids, can help one another in terms of how do I get into that personalized playlist that my teacher created for me after my weekly assessment, and so I think just simplifying and helping everything to be in one place. When I think about the teacher who has, relied on co-teaching and has 2/3 of their classroom are English language learners, how do I make the resources right there at his or her fingertips to help them to differentiate and provide the necessary supports for those kids when that co-teacher can't be with them for every element of their instruction? So I think just simplifying, keeping things in one place, and then maximizing how important it is to be able to see and understand the whole child in order to be able to personalize learning.
Yeah, that's great. Shara.
Well, we were, talking about personalized learning and where everyone's at. I keep talking about this, but yesterday when we were having these conversations, it was how can we pull in the title teachers, and how can we pull in the resource teachers, and how can we provide the guidance teacher to have her lessons available, and how can we integrate all this in one-stop shop? And Canvas, I talk about Canvas. I love Canvas. Canvas can do that, but it also has external tools available that allow us to do that as well. So not only, the native platform, but all these other things that we can bring onto it that help us to springboard all of those things. So how do we best map that out? And, I was looking in the chat and you're talking about templates, and how can we create a template for our staff to meet their needs? Maybe it's different at the K2 level than it is at the 3-6 level, but how can we create a template so that they have all those things to make learning personal, so that they can reach their guidance teacher from one spot, so they can get to their title resources that they need in one spot. And we also talked about integrations that allow you to meet one-on-one. How do I meet with my speech and language pathologist when I need to? How do I meet with my occupational therapist? We can do that all from one place and really meet the needs of every kid. But it has to be planned and it has to be thought out. So it's exciting work, and I think even if we're remote or even if we're in person, I think the work is still going to be valued by many. So,
and I think that's really one of the powerful elements of bringing this group together. We have 4 unbelievable experts who bring a wealth of perspective and will help facilitate, I just think, the greatest conversations, but also really get people thinking about kind of our best practices. I always say that, when a school implements something, they implement some piece of software. For them, they get one shot to get it right. When from our perspective, we've seen thousands of implementations of Canvas, literally thousands of implementations of that product. And so we see what works and we see what the potential is. And a lot of times we see things that seem really common sense to us. And yet, if you're new or you're trying to get started, you don't have that, the benefit of having had 1,000 different opportunities to see those things work. And so I think we're bringing the best of people together who have such extensive experience working with, school districts around the country. It's exciting. Dean, what does it mean as you think about making learning personal? You're going to finish us off here. So
right.
Get this right.
All right. Well, no pressure here. What I think about as in terms of an LMS, I think of what a godsend and what a relief it can be for teachers for the how and the what. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do? Where are we going to go for these things? Once we nail that down within our LMS, now our educators can begin to focus on that why, and we have more time to do that and really start to think about those unique learners and those unique situations that we may not have thought of. I think what everybody forgets is we're professional educators. We're not facilitators of learning. We have a myriad of things that we can do should we choose to. And when I go and start to have conversations with teachers, one of the things I ask them is, Think of that one student. Who's that one student that you've missing that face? They can tell you in an instant who that is, why they miss them, and where they're, and want to know what they're doing. Those kids that are coming to school every day, you might be that one person. So how can you have that unique experience online? How can you have that human experience and have that exchange of emotion, have that exchange of authenticity, so that as students start to use this platform, it's not that they're using an LMS, it's I get the opportunity to get access to that person that cares about me, that loves me, that wants me to do well in life. And for me, that's what an LMS can do, should we choose to.
And I think that I love that you said it that way, Dean. I couldn't say it better myself, for certain. And I think it's also highlights the importance of, from a leadership perspective, we need leaders who can help teachers understand that the value of that it's not just, hey, there's a piece of technology, I expect you to use it because, but actually that this isn't about technology at all. This is about learning. This is about our kids, whether those kids are 7 years old or 10 or 15, or they're 22 or 55, or Dean, you've got people in your program 73, that it's about them. It is about providing those connections, those opportunities to make learning personal for each of our students in whatever environment whatever environment we are in. And I think we have learned a lot. I think there's opportunities for us to grow, and the best way we're going to grow is by growing together, in creating opportunities for people to come together to be able to talk about these things. I want to thank you all, and I do want to highlight that over the next 4 weeks, you all are going to be coming and doing sessions. You will each lead a session over the next 4 weeks, talking about each of the sessions that will be part of the Virtual Leadership Institute, and kind of a mini preview of what that all looks like. I'm excited about that. I hope that people see that as an opportunity to think deeply about this, to be part of a community of educators who are committed to growing and improving in our practice, whatever challenges lay in front of us. But I also hope moving forward that we continue to be mindful of our students over the summer, the kinds of, I think, unknown traumas that current situations put kids in, the fear and anxiety that exists in our world that as adults, our role is even more important, that schools are the place where we teach kids how to get along, where we teach people how to respect one another and the opinions of one another, and that's how we bring people together, is when we acknowledge our differences and we allow each other to appreciate and respect one another. And I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate all you do for the students, for the educators that are around here listening, how much I value your role in society. And I wish you guys all the best. And I hope you guys enjoy the next 4 sessions, because they're going to be all yours.
Thanks, Trenton.
Thank you.